Welcome back. It's another fantastic day in Algebra 1, and today we're going to be talking about the midpoint formula and what it can be used for. Now, the midpoint formula is an actual mathematical formula that is very helpful, as most formulas are, because you can just plug things in. But before we get into using the formula, I want you to think about what the midpoint actually is. Midpoint. Point in the midpoint. Let's take a look. Take a look right here at this piece of piece of grid paper. Okay, so number 1 says plot the points 6, 3, and -4, -1 on the coordinate plane. So we're going to go over to 6, 3, and -4, -1, and we are going to connect those. Always use a straight edge. I happen to have a notebook here that I'm just going to throw down and use this as my straight edge. Make sure to line up the middle of your points. Connect them with your straight edge. There we go. So there's a segment between those 2 points. What do you think the midpoint is going to be? Why don't you go ahead and pause it. Answer number 2. What do you think the midpoint is going to be and why? Okay, so now that you've thought about what the midpoint actually is, let's take a look at how do we find out for sure, okay? Because that's really important. You got to make sure that you know for sure that what you're doing is right. Anytime we are given 2 points, okay, we're going to say that the first point is x1, y1, and the second is x2, y2. The midpoint can be found like this. You can take x1 plus x2, so the first value plus the first value, and then divide by 2. And then the second half of your point, remember, is the y value, so you're going to take y1 plus y2, y1 plus y2, and then divide by 2. What you're actually doing is finding the averages of the 2 points to find your new point. Okay, so let's get back to finding what the actual midpoint is. We've got our formula, and so what we're going to do is we are going to take our points, and here's point 1 and point 2 for the x's, and y1 and y2 for the y's, and we're just going to go ahead and plug them into our formula. Let's set this up here. We're going to have x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and then we're going to have y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So we're just going to give ourselves a little bit of a setup here. Our x's are going to be 6 plus -4. And then our y's are going to be 3 plus -1. So we can just go through and simplify this here. 6 plus -4 is just going to be +2. Divided by 2 is 1. And then 3 plus -1 is 2. Divided by 2 is 1. So our real midpoint is going to be right at the point 1, 1, which is right here. Is that what you guessed? How did it compare? Did you get close? Looking at a graph is sometimes helpful, but knowing for sure that algebraically it's correct is where we find the most valuable information. So you want to make sure that you memorize this formula and that you're able to use it. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. Number 34. Okay, so number 34, let's go ahead and do our setup. We've got x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And you know what? I'm going to do my y's in green just to make sure that this is all clear. I'm going to add them up top and then divide by 2. My y's are green, 9 and 0, and my x's are blue, 3 and 8. So I've got 3 plus 8 for my x's, and 9 plus 0 for my y's. Now that I have everything plugged in, I'm going to go ahead and solve and see what those values are. So 3 plus 8 is 8, 9, 10, 11, divided by 2, which we can't actually do, so go ahead and leave it as a fraction. That's just fine. And then 9 plus 0 is just 9, divided by 2, and there we have it. Since we can't actually do the division, we're just going to leave them as fractions, and that is perfectly all right. Let's take a look at number 37. So we have our whole midpoint is going to be x's added and then divided by 2, and then y's added and divided by 2. Go ahead and label everything. Make sure I have all my parts and pieces. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I get my kids some special toy for Christmas, I always like to make sure that I have all the pieces before I just start doing stuff, because then I'll lose things and get lost and forget, and it becomes a nightmare. Math is the same way. So we're going to do -2 plus -8 for our x's, and our y's are going to be -4 plus -3. Now let's go ahead and figure out what that's going to be. -2 and -8 gives me -10 divided by 2. And then -4 and -3 gives me -7 divided by 2. And I can simplify that, so I'm going to keep going. -10 divided by 2 is just going to be -5. -7 divided by 2 I can't really simplify, so I'll leave that one as a fraction. That's fine. And there's my midpoint. Why don't you tackle number 40? Pause the video, take a look, and see if you can get it on your own, and then come back when you want to compare notes. How'd you do? Did you get -10 and -1/2? I hope so. Let's take a look at a couple more. For number 35, we are going to go ahead and do our setup. X's add together, divide by 2. Y's add together, divide by 2. In parentheses, because that's what makes it a coordinate point. Our x's, x, I've got 6 and -7. Y's, I've got -2 and -10. So 6 and -7, when I combine them, give me -1/2. -2 and -10, when I combine them, give me -12/2. And I can simplify this one, so I'm going to keep going. I've got -1/2, and -12 divided by 2 is -6. So there's my midpoint for number 35. All right, why don't you take a look at the rest of these? If you need any more help, feel free to take a look at part 2 of the video, where I'll go over a few more of these problems with you.